Good evening, Body Science fam. My name's Harriet Walker and I am an accredited sports dietitian. This is my second Facebook Live today for Body Science. I'm hoping you're not sick of my voice, but it's going to be very useful information. So hang tight with me as we go through tonight's topic. We covered off in the last few weeks some of the basic topics around nutrition. And tonight I am covering off on micronutrients. So we spoke about macronutrients, which are the carbs, fats, and protein that we need to get energy from our diet. So they get broken down and then they provide our cells with energy. The micronutrients are elements and basically elements of food that provide us with they're sort of cofactors in a lot of different chemical reactions in our body. They are involved with energy production, immune function, which is a really hot topic right now, blood factors. They play a role in growth, in hormones. So vitamins and minerals, which are our micronutrients, provide a lot of really important information to the chemical reactions in our body. So basically, what we're going to go through tonight is some of the sort of ins and outs of micronutrients, and we'll cover off on a little bit more detail around some of the specific micronutrients that are important for immune function, because everybody's asking, how do I boost my immune function at the moment? It's pretty crazy. But basically, yeah, so micronutrients are just the sort of, they're lots of, we only need them in small amounts, which is why they're called micro, so that's the first bit. So compared to macro, which we need to eat in grams per day, micronutrients we only need to eat in smaller amounts like milligrams, and in some cases, micrograms. But the thing is, if we don't get enough of them, even though we only need them in teeny tiny amounts like 100 milligrams, which is a gram for calcium, our body really suffers when we don't get enough. Hey Ben, good to see you back. Thanks for coming on board. So basically, we don't need large amounts, but when we don't get them, it becomes a problem. These days in developed countries like our lucky land of Australia, we don't tend to see true deficiencies of single nutrients like we used to back in the day when we were less set up. So we used to see things like vitamin D deficiency. Actually, we still do see vitamin D deficiency, but one of the side effects in children of vitamin D deficiency, which we don't see as often, is a condition called rickets. Vitamin D is really important for a number of different things, which I'll touch on later. But one of the things is bone development. And we used to see, we're talking hundreds of years ago, that kids would get these sort of bow legs, rickets, from not having enough vitamin D. There's, deficiencies where, protein is not in enough, but there's also micronutrients associated with that, which can impact the physical development. Again, these are really sort of issues. These single nutrient deficiencies are really seen more commonly in developing countries. Scurvy is another one that we don't see as much anymore, which is a vitamin C deficiency. Although, that said, I was reading a report the other day, there has been a rise in scurvy cases. So scurvy is like a vitamin C, which we get from fresh fruits and vegetables. There has been a rise in scurvy in just normal population people, developed countries, as a result of eating a purely processed diet. So they were just eating highly processed takeaway foods. I think it was all sort of yellow and brown fried foods, and they had a couple of cases on the rise of scurvy. So as I said, micronutrient deficiencies, single deficiencies don't tend to happen as they used to. They're not as big a deal in developed countries. Another thing that has stopped that from being an issue is our popular foods in our food system are actually fortified with the essential vitamins and minerals. So when I'm talking about essential vitamins and minerals, so vitamins, we're talking, there's 13. Some of them are fat soluble. So we've got vitamins D, E, A, and K. These are fat soluble vitamins, so they require fat in the body to be taken into the cell and used. And then we also have our water soluble vitamins, so our B vitamins and vitamin C. And there's a lot of different B vitamins, so B1, B2, it goes down the list, and vitamin K. No, that's a fat soluble one. Anyway, so we used to fortify, sorry, I was talking about fortification. So back in the day, none of our foods were fortified. So if people weren't eating well, they were more likely to get deficiencies. Public health is to thank for fortification. So you will notice that in things that we eat commonly, so cereals, flour, juices, the basic staple foods, actually the stuff that's off the shelf now at the moment when we're in this COVID crisis, they're what we call our sort of staple foods. Anything that's kind of gone off the shelf is probably what we'd consider a staple. They're actually fortified with a minimum amount of micronutrients as a population initiative to help ward off these deficiencies that we see in the more undeveloped countries. So we're actually super lucky where we are that a lot of these micronutrients are fortified in our food. It helps us stay healthy even when we probably don't have the best diet. The minerals, we're looking at things like calcium, iodine, magnesium, potassium, zinc, sodium. They're the major ones. And then there are some other minerals which we don't need as much of, teeny tiny amounts, like copper, manganese, selenium, fluoride, chromium. They're there, but we don't actually need as much of those to stay fit and healthy. So we've got vitamins, we've got minerals. These days in the world, we don't tend to get deficiencies like we used to. So we don't see these pretty awful diseases like rickets and scurvy anymore in developed countries because we have fortification, which is fantastic. All flour that is produced within Australia needs to be fortified with folate, and folate is one of the B vitamins that is super important for neural tube development in babies. So a lot of the prenatal supplements are rich in folate. So that's again another one of those public health initiatives with micronutrients where, you know, even if you're eating a pretty crappy diet, a lot of the foods that we would commonly consume in a crappy diet, white and brown and yellow foods, are actually fortified. So it's a bit of peace of mind. Folate is actually, you know, we can get all of these vitamins and minerals from food though, which is really what we should be doing. There are certain scenarios where we aren't getting enough. But for the most part, each one of the vitamins and minerals actually has a daily recommended intake. So these are intakes that are based off a very large body of scientific research, and they have been set for each specific vitamin mineral, so vitamin D, E, A, K, B vitamin C. They all have a daily intake that we should have. And these are based off what amount does needs to be taken in daily to save either 50% of the population from deficiency, which is called an EAR, estimated average requirement, or 97%, which is a recommended daily intake. So that would save, they base that number off saving 98% of the population from deficiency. So when you go to a credible source of information, like the NHMRC, which is a medical research centre for Australia. You can go on the eatforhealth.gov.au website, put in your name, put in your age, and your gender, because it does differ for gender. And it'll actually give you a printout of what your recommended daily intakes for each of the micronutrients are. So this is a really good way of just starting out if you don't know how much you should be having of anything. Using the eatforhealth.gov.au website, plug that in, and then they've got lots of great calculators on there, and they've got a micronutrient calculator. You put in your age, you put in your gender, and it'll spit out for calcium you should be having 1,000 milligrams, for iron you should be having 15 milligrams, and it'll go through the list. Then it's a matter of figuring out what foods are rich in those micronutrients. So we know that, for example, calcium is really rich in dairy. And so in order to meet my daily requirements for calcium, I need to be having 3 serves of dairy, which each probably contain around the 300, 250 milligrams of calcium. Or I might be looking, if I don't eat dairy, I might be looking for fortified foods. All dairy alternatives, you'll note, are fortified with calcium up to the level. Great, Ben's already on it. He's on the website and he's looking up his micronutrient requirements. So all milk alternatives, so soy milk, rice milk, oat milk, it is legal for them to fortify up to the level that you would get from cow's milk. So that's a little hot tip. So again, fortification is really important, especially if you follow a diet where specific nutrients may not be consumed in large amounts, such as like a plant-based diet. If you're vegan, vegetarian, there are certain nutrients in that sort of pattern of eating that you may find it hard to eat up to the recommended daily intake, in which case supplementation and fortification are really useful. So again, once you know what your daily recommended intakes is, it's about finding the foods that are rich in those. And this is why food groups can be really useful. So food groups are basically broken up into which macronutrient does it give you a lot of, and also what are the key micronutrients in that specific food. So we've got whole grains. So whole grains are really rich in carbohydrate and fiber, but they also provide us with B vitamins, for example. So it can be quite tough if you cut out whole grains to meet your daily B vitamin intake. We know dairy is really rich in protein, in carbohydrates, and in a little bit of fat. So they're macronutrients. But it's also really rich in calcium. So we want to make sure that we get that food group sorted. Fruits and vegetables, another food groups, are really rich in the vitamin C, the B vitamins as well, and some minerals as well. So things like green leafy vegetables are rich in iron. Nuts and seeds are really rich in, they can be rich in iron, zinc, magnesium. So if you're really interested in this stuff, you can look up what your daily intake requirements are, and then you can go on a little bit of a research hunt, because food isn't ever just one thing. Dairy doesn't just give us protein. It gives us protein, it gives us carbs, it gives us a little bit of fat, it also gives us calcium and other micronutrients as well. So this is the reason why a varied diet is super important, because right now I'm telling you all these, I'm telling you that certain foods are rich in certain things. An easy way to just make sure that you're generally, hitting the mark is eating a variety of foods across the main food groups. So dairy, protein foods, whole grains, vegetables, fruit, and then healthy fats, as well. And we want to be making sure that we're consuming a range of foods from across those food groups on a regular basis across the day. And this means that we're very likely to be, if we're eating a mainly unprocessed diet and we're eating across the food groups, that we're going to be meeting our nutrition requirements without giving it too much thought. Where you should give it a little bit more thought is if you're following a diet that may restrict what you have, so you might have food allergies or intolerances, which mean you have to cut out things like wheat or dairy or eggs or whatnot. It's important that if you are required to cut out a certain food group, that you get some understanding about what might be missing in your diet if you can't have those specific foods. Because it might be, like, for example, if you can't have eggs are really rich in a micronutrient called choline. And choline is super important for brain development, especially for women of childbearing age. And we want to make sure that if we're not getting choline from eggs, what other foods can we be eating? And how much do I need to be consuming in order to meet the needs? So this stuff is, there's a lot of sort of detail that we could go into it. But long and short, we want to be talking about micronutrients, especially if you're somebody who follows a flexible dieting approach. Because yes, calories are important in order to give us our energy budget for the day. And within that energy budget, we want to be making sure that we're consuming enough of the carbohydrate, fats, and protein in the right amounts to meet our energy requirements. So if we think about calories and macros really in terms of giving us energy, and micronutrients are not giving us energy per se directly, but the micronutrients are really important for all the little chemical reactions that are required in order to break down the carbs, protein, fat, and to produce them and to produce the energy. So it's as though we want to try and we're going through a train station, and we want to get from station A to station Z. We can say that breaking down carbohydrates in order to get energy, I need to go through all the different stations, which are all the different metabolic steps that our body does to break down in order to release energy. But in order to get from A to B, I might need vitamin B12. And in order to get from B to C, I might need vitamin B6. And then in order to get from B to C, I need a little bit of zinc. That's not exactly how it goes, but if you think about it in that terms, each step of a chemical reaction that happens in our body will generally have a micronutrient, a vitamin or a mineral involved, which means that across the day, we've got so many of these chemical reactions going on. If we're not consuming enough of these micronutrients from our food, so if we're just focusing on calories and macros and we're not looking at the micronutrient content of these foods, we can run into trouble. A, we can not feel so great. B, our energy levels are going to be pretty low because that train station A to B, B to C is not happening. It's happening like on half a fuel of tank. It's happening much slower than if you had readily available sources of these micronutrients. So long and short, there are there's a couple of considerations, but the first step, if you know nothing about micronutrients, is to jump on that MHMRC website, eatforhealth.gov.au, plug in your age and gender. It'll spit out how many of each micronutrient that you need, and then you can go about doing a bit of homework and figuring out, okay, what foods are rich in zinc, what foods are rich in magnesium, and this can be a really great little project if you've got a little bit of extra time on your hands at the moment, guys. This would be the way to go. I also know that at the moment it can be a little bit difficult to get your hands on the foods that you'd normally consume, and vegetables can be a little bit hard to come by. So, you know, and for some people who don't like eating vegetables, I know I've got a couple of clients where they just don't like them. They're not going to do it. So that's when I might use something like a greens powder to supplement their diet. And if I've got somebody who's dieting, who is cutting for a bodybuilding competition, they're not eating enough calories in order to meet their micronutrient needs. Again, that's a situation where we might consider, in conversation with a dietitian, you know, we might be looking at using a multivitamin. So we want to make sure that we're trying to get it from food first, and if that doesn't happen, then there are backups, some like the greens powders or a multivitamin or something like that, that can actually help us hit the requirements. So homework for tonight, guys: if you're not doing anything and you want a little bit of stimulation, jump on eatforhealth.gov.au, plug in your numbers, and then go for a little bit of a hunt around about what foods contain those micronutrients. And I bet by the end of doing that and applying it consistently, because we need to be eating the micronutrients consistently across a long period of time, your body is going to be feeling tip-top and your immune function is going to be in really great shape as well. So I'm going to wrap it up there, guys. Thanks for having me again tonight. We've got another speaker next week who will be covering off on another awesome topic. I will see you guys in the morning, 8 a.m. Sydney time. It's 7 a.m. Queensland's time for another topic, and I look forward to seeing you guys then. Bye.